المحاضرة الثانية إن شاء الله راح تتناول أهمية الخدمات الأمنية المرتكزة على مواجهة التهديدات. راح يقدمها الأخ نزار وفا من سيسكو. تفضل.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nizar Wafa. I apologize on behalf of Paul Gavi, he will not be able to make it, but today we'll be explaining exactly the same methodology that we typically apply in Cisco to improve the security posture. So I am part of the security solutions organizations within Cisco, specifically an area of security. And without any further ado, let's go straight to some of the key facts that we've been gathering for quite some time. So the issue with security is that it only takes a few minutes to exploit a system, but it takes a very long period of time to actually find out that there is an issue in the first place. So to start with, the initial attack or initial compromise could take a few seconds or minutes, but to find out that you've actually got an issue as a result of the attack, it will take you between days and weeks or even months to find out. So therefore, because of the nature of the attack, it's very important to come up with a mechanism or a framework to be threat-centric. And to do that, we need to understand what the threat is about in the first place. Some findings. So we know for a fact that the business model is changing. Back in the days, we had a desktop, we had a laptop, but right now we're actually using mobiles, we're using tablets, we're using new emerging technologies to support our core business, to primarily access our applications, to help us execute the core business. So what we see right now as a trend is the bring your own device into the organization. It could be for financial reasons, it could be the changing business fashion, but it's one of the things that we've been observing, and 90% of the risk is as a result of that business change. The other powerful tool that organizations don't realize could have a very negative impact on the organization is the fact that their own employees are accessing social media websites on the same handsets where they're actually accessing their emails. As a result, 29% of the compromise comes from the utilization of social media applications. More complexity is also introduced as a result of downloading more and more applications on the same very devices that you use to run business. And that will actually cause even more compromise to the applications and the infrastructure that supports the application. So that's where we're coming from. When we talk about threat-centric, it means really realizing where the threat is coming from in the first place, and then how we can actually formulate a framework or a solution to address such threats. So on average, 60% of the data is stolen in hours. So by the time the SOC finds out you've got an issue, the attacker would have actually got into the environment, managed to steal whatever information they want, and then you would find about it maybe by coincidence as a result of a particular incident in your IT environment. So 54% of these 60% attacks will be undiscovered after months or sometimes even 6 months. So I guess you've been watching the news recently, and then you can see a lot of the 10 million, 100 million kind of attacks are becoming more and more and more popular in the media nowadays. And we've seen that for the past couple of 3 years. Huge media firms, oil and gas organizations, banks, organized groups across multi-banking organizations. So why is this happening? So I mean, it's very interesting the fact that a threat is there and we understand that. So why is this happening? It's happening because each and every time we come up with a new solution to mitigate security, the hacktivists or the attackers are actually coming up with new methodologies to overcome these security controls and measures. So you can see, there are many ways to actually exploit an environment, and you will always continuously have the challenge of coming up with a cost-effective security solution. So today you might invest in a SIM, and then a SIM in a couple of years' time may not be as effective due to that sophistication. And then you need to figure out which is the right security solution in light of these emerging threats, which are being undiscovered on a daily basis. Okay, so 32% of organizations with multi-technology, they're actually being breached. So there's something called technology harmony. You have different brands from different manufacturers, from different vendors, and that introduces an issue. There is a way of doing it, but we'll shed some light on that in the next few slides. 78% of organizations have experienced a data breach as a result of an employee. So you deployed a security kit, you enforced a policy and a procedure, but then the employee, with a word of a mouth, didn't realize that he could actually compromise the environment. So this is very, very important. The issue here is that the vast majority of the attacks come as a result of such attitude or behavior. The more connectivity you actually bring into the environment, you've got the main office, a DA, a DR, and then you've got branches scattered across a geography. That also introduces a business risks. So how do you deal with it? That's a very good question. So where do we start? I'm sure you've seen this before. Lots of standards, people, technology, process. We've seen this before so many times. And it's all very, very confusing. So what's the most effective way to actually kick off a security engagement? Do we look at the build of the SOC, the implementation of the SOC? Do we develop a strategy? Do we look into the three major elements? Oh, so we might also need to look into the global standards for applying security controls. It's very, very confusing. So to that end, there has to be a way to put all of these in a context from a threat-centric point of view. So we've got something that we call the attack continuum. What does that mean? When we look at security, we need to look at it from three phases point of view. So we need to look at the before phase, during phase, and the after phase. Before means that you need to be proactive about your security. How do you actually mitigate the attack before it potentially happens? But to do that, you need to have a set of technologies, processes, and of course the people to ensure that you will mitigate the attack as much as you can. While you're actually encountering the attack, you need to have the capability to be able to correlate with ongoing threat intelligence. So the more threat intelligence you receive while you're actually monitoring your environment, you need to be able to correlate that with previously encountered attacks or events in order to come up with something more meaningful in terms of findings. The after phase, and we've seen it before, so clients would actually invest in SOCs and in SIEMs and in larger security products, but they still encounter incidents. And we've seen it in huge organizations. Perhaps you've been watching the news, some of the US government organizations were actually compromised recently, although they have the best and the greatest in terms of security capabilities. So why is the after phase important? It puts things in a context. So at a given point in time, we noticed that was the behavior of the environment. And then at another given point in time, we noticed a different behavior of the IT environment. So it's very important to do the aftermath so you can control the damage moving forward. You need to enforce certain policies and procedures and perhaps invest in technology in order to improve the security posture. Now, if you do it from a point in time, that's good. It gives you the aftermath. But if you have a mechanism to give you a continuous and ongoing security approach, would be most optimum. Right, so when we talk about security, it is very important to define a framework, and the most crucial element in security is to actually be able to detect that you have an issue in the first place. So we can talk about a monitoring tool or a particular standard that is compliant with a particular government regulation, or you might need to adhere to ISO 27001. This is all, of course, it's part of the industry. But we also need to keep in mind that we need to be able to detect that there's an issue in the first place. And there are ways of doing that. The detection has to be relevant to two elements. It needs to be relevant to your core business, your core applications, and how you apply security as a result on top based on your business priorities. Then you need to confirm that there is an issue within your environment. Now, once we have these two figured out, we can then easily talk about mitigation and remediation. That becomes a very, very simple job once we understand what the issue is in the first place. So I presented before that slide that has lots of standards and lots of elements between people, technology, and process. How do you put things in perspective from a simplified approach point of view? So it's very simple. First step is to basically conduct an assessment. It defines what you have, what you don't have, what are your business objectives, what are your KPIs, the matrices that you need to apply in your environment to make sure that you're best protected against known and unknown attacks. Now, once you have the findings, you need to materialize that into a strategy. That strategy is very important because it tells you about how security solutions should work based on your business priorities. And then you can develop the different building blocks to build a larger security framework. When we do that, it's very important to look at things like indications of compromise. So I can assess your environment from a best practice from a particular vendor point of view, but it may not take into account things like indications of compromise. Attack vectors. So I've got a good technology, well reputable in Gartner or Forrester, but then the attack vectors are becoming more sophisticated and advanced. Threat intel. So people are actually doing the assessment. They are continuously receiving threat intelligence. And of course, global visibility. So if I saw a particular trend or attack, or if I actually saw a real incident, and I saw the same thing being replicated in a different geography, I have the capability and the know-how and the speed to come up with a solution that has encountered similar experiences from the past. And that's what we call threat-centric. So everything that you plan to introduce in your environment as a security solution has to be pretty much aligned with a threat-centric approach. So typically, you need to do a discovery phase. That will show you the maturity of your organization in terms of people, technology, and process. And there are so many topics that fall under that. And then you need to develop an architecture. This is not a specific solution, just an approach to show a typical flow when developing a security solution. Now, once the architecture is developed, it needs to be built. But what do we need to take into account once we're actually building that solution? How that solution seamlessly integrates within your environment without impacting the priorities of your business. Transition phase needs to be tested, it needs to be tuned, it needs to do what it's meant to do based on your business priorities. And of course, you need to have ongoing capabilities to manage the various platforms that you're actually using to either monitor or hunt or investigate your security events. To put this in summary, 4 major elements come into play when we talk about ongoing security. It's the people, the intelligence, the technology, and the analytics. Typically, we talk about people, technology, and process. We'd like to introduce a new layer that's called analytics. And that's some sort of a mechanism to proactively look for threats rather than having to rely on known attacks or typical information that we have in database, global database, or some predefined threats that we are already aware of. So you need to introduce something that has some sort of a machine learning predictive analytics in order to predict that the attack could or may happen, and as a result act in a proactive fashion. So the people, it's very important to look at people from 2 different points of view. So there are the people running your day-to-day security operations. There are the people who've got the experience or the certificates to make sure that the security operations are effective. But also, it's very important to make sure that your own employees are aware of security. So you may have, like I said, invested in the best technology, or you may have invested in the best capabilities in the market, but you also need to make sure that your employees are aware of what's happening outside, because it's a click of a button and then you spread the malware in your environment, and that causes a major damage. The intelligence is very important because it helps you to realign your defense mechanism from an IT point of view based on the threat intelligence that you receive on a regular basis. So you're actually better prepared when you have continuously threat intel feeding into your environment. The analytics, so that's a new approach. And here is the use case. So if you have an individual within your environment who's actually not supposed to send or receive traffic after the business working hours, and you don't set, so this is a use case, and then you don't set a rule or a policy, to basically look into this particular machine. Now, if your monitoring platform doesn't have that use case and you did not set a rule against it, it will go unseen for a period of time. And if this particular machine has a malware that managed to set up a command and control that can basically causes even more damage to this particular endpoint by sending and receiving data, then it's an issue. Now, if you apply a new methodology whereby you actually compare the behavior of the environment from day 1, day 2, day 3, and you don't see any traffic, day 8 you see traffic. Now, we don't know what the immediate issue is, but then you do that comparison on a regular basis, and it helps you to realize that there is an issue, there's an anomaly, there's a difference in the pattern, and therefore it needs to be further investigated. In terms of technology, there are many technologies out there to achieve this, but the key part here is that whenever we come up with this architecture, if you will, or these components, it needs to be business critical asset focused approach. So, some of the statistics that we were actually able to obtain were the result of our research and development group in Cisco. This group is called Talos, and we've got another group called Vulnerability Research Team. These two teams collectively, they have the ability to see 35% of the world email traffic. And that gives us information about how attacks are happening, the nature of phishing activities, and what are we going to do about it. We're also receiving about 13 million web requests. The important part is the 24/7 operation. So round the clock, we're actually collecting intelligence. We're actually looking into new attack patterns. We're actually able to look at new attack vectors that were not seen before. So as a result, that will be stored in a database, and then that database will be the foundation for some sort of a correlation or a sandbox capability that you can always sync your environment with to get the latest in terms of threat intelligence. Everything that we're gathering from these two groups is actually feeding into what we call Cisco Collective Security Intelligence. The feeds that come in here will automatically be materialized in the form of patches to enhance and improve technologies. So if you have a SIM or if you have a product and you wish to introduce threat intelligence into it, it will be getting the collective security intelligence into it as a result. So we spoke about the complexity of starting a security solution because of the various standards out there, because of the difficulty to choose where to start. Shall I hire people? Shall I look into processes? Shall I look into compliance? All of these things are very, it's the valid questions to build a proper security setup. But how do we act? How do we start? So we start with the assessment and then the discovery phase. We know what we have, what we don't have, and then once we put an action plan together, that will constitute a strategy based on your business priorities. So if you plan to go into introducing mobility services in your organization, you need to look into our security solution would actually feed into that rather than impacting the performance of your core business. So when you have a threat-centric approach, it's fast and it's accurate and it's focused because it gives you the right level of visibility based on our understanding of the business critical applications. So what are the benefits of a threat-centric approach? First of all, it's proactive security capability. Unknown threats are no longer an issue because you actually look at the pattern, you look at the behavior of the environment. So if you have a new malware that does not yet have a signature, you will be able to actually apply forensics and rely on certain technologies to be able to detect the behavior of the environment, and as a result, figure out a way to fix it, especially if the attack doesn't have a known signature. So we start with the business, and we look at the desired maturity in the organization. How far do you want to go? How many policies and procedures you want to enforce? Do you want to introduce guidelines, new guidelines, to support the business? And of course, the expected challenges in executing such a solution. You might want to have a full-fledged security framework to improve and enhance the security posture of your organization, but you might also encounter challenges as a result of that. So, in summary, three major phases that help put things in a context. So, planning a security solution that is really aligned with your business priorities, and then building a robust security infrastructure based on the outcome that comes from the planning phase. And of course, you need to have right capabilities to have ongoing management of that setup that you've actually built moving forward. Thank you very much.